Welcome everyone to the Lofi Poli Sci podcast. I'm your host Michael Pickering, and that's right, Lo-Fi as in low fidelity, low quality, in your face, messy as can be global news show. Here we're going to talk about that famous question, what's going on in the world today? We'll be covering 5 headlines from across the globe and then choose one to go into a more detailed analysis. The news fresh off the press. Source, Reuters, World Section. Forces aligned with Tripoli government advance along West Libyan coast. The United Nations-backed government of Libya, with international aid and local supporters, are making ground in this civil war that has been going on since 2014. Libya has been consumed with civil strife since Colonel Gaddafi was murdered and his regime toppled in 2011, a regime change as a consequence of the Arab Spring going on at the time in the region and the world. The implications. While many individuals and governments point to the migrant crisis in Europe as having its roots in the Syrian civil war, Libya's civil war is a major contributing factor as well. Many experts argue that Libya is not a country in civil war, but rather a failed state with no central government that legitimately controls all of its sovereign territory. Several reports in the past few years have documented the extent of this lawlessness, with actual footage of the slave trade in the country taking advantage of people seeking political asylum elsewhere. All too often do we forget about the tragedies of war in countries that seem so far away to us. But we should always remember that regardless of country or creed, we are all human beings. May we hope that this conflict ends soon and that people's life can begin to see a glimmer of hope moving forward. Next up, source, AP News International. Netanyahu rival calls for coalition deal ahead of deadline. Last week, we had brought coverage of the beginning of the closing of a deal between rival parties to form a coalition government in Israel, which has seen 3 elections in just over a year without being able to form a government. At the end of last week, it had appeared that a deal was close. However, now the opposition of the Prime Minister is signaling that may not be the case. The implications. Reports had surfaced that the Prime Minister, currently in the middle of a corruption case at the highest level of government, wanted as a part of the agreement to have increased power over the judiciary. The opposition, according to reports, refused this, as it would be seen as Netanyahu attempting to stack the deck in his favor for the upcoming proceedings. If the coalition is not made by midnight tonight, Israelis may be going back to the poll for a 4th time, and no one is even sure how that would take place, or if it could take place, with everything that's going on at the moment. We'll be keeping an eye on this story as it develops further. Our following story, source, Reuters, World Section. Officials say 8 killed in Myanmar, Rakhine State. Army says no information. To be clear, these are local officials and residents reporting the 8 killed by shelling, while the national military is saying they have no information or reports on the incident. The background and implications. This goes back to the conflict between the government and anti-military forces in 2016 and 2017, particularly when the military, in response to what they claimed to be a terrorist attack, began attacking a minority population in the country known as the Rohingya, who lived in the Rakhine state of Myanmar. The government's attacks forced nearly 1 million Rohingya from their homes into neighboring Bangladesh, and has since created one of the world's largest refugee camps. The government has long held that the Rohingya are not Myanmar citizens, and thus has not let them back into the country since forced to Bangladesh over 3 years ago. Myanmar has operated as a democracy from the outside looking in, but long have we here at Lofi Poli Sci questioned if the military is really the one still in control. Stories like this help provide us with more evidence of the answer to that question. And now for our headline in the Spotlight segment. Source, BBC World. Russia spy trial opens for ex-US Marine. Paul Wellhen, the ex-US Marine, was arrested almost a year and a half ago in his hotel room in Moscow, where the Russian Federal Security Services say they found him with a USB which contained government secrets. Wellhen claims that the USB was planted there. The implications. The US ambassador to Russia has made complaints to the government over his treatment and the charges in general, as well as Wellhen's attorney has argued that the trial should be postponed due to the current circumstances in the world, and argues that the Russian government is forcing this trial through quickly so that it can be done under the radar while everyone else in the world is focusing on other issues. Well, we here at Lo-Fi hear ya, and we're paying attention. It could be Iranian spies, Lebanese drug bust, or Russian US spy trials. We keep Lo-Fi Nation connected to the real, and ain't nothing going under our radar. So to the Lo-Fi Poli Sci students out there, what do we think of this trial proceeding ahead, even though other judicial proceedings in Moscow are being postponed? Have you heard about this story before? And if not, why not? Write in and let us know your thoughts. And a last piece of news from the BBC, Science. Why does President Trump want to mine on the moon? It seems like there were a million stories this weekend that went all lo-fi, low-key under radar. Wake up, people. There's more going on out there than what's in front of your face. The U.S. President signed an executive order which provides the basis for the U.S. to have the right to claim resources from space, and further explains that the U.S. did not need permission from anyone to start claiming those resources. The implications: moon mining, Mars marauding, Pluto pirating, Saturn stealing, Mercury meltdown, a Venus violation of our cosmic exploration. Anyone want to fix this planet before we start destroying the rest of them? You tell me. Just a thought. Also, a side note. Apologies to Jupiter and Neptune. You did not fit into the rhyme scheme. I'll catch you next time. And that's a brief snapshot of what's going on in the world and the galaxy today. Please write in with your questions, comments, and requests of countries for our new segments to Lofi Poli Sci at planetmail.com. That's Lofi, L-O-F-I, Poli, P-O-L-I, Sci, S-C-I, at planetmail.com. Let me say thank you so much for listening. Stay safe, wash those hands, and I'll see you next time on the Lofi Poli Sci podcast. Pickering, signing off.